Hi friends, and welcome back to Casual Ableism Talks, the podcast. In today's episode, Casual Ableism talks accessible travel with Wheely Braw's Helen Lear-Grant. Accessible travel is such an important topic, and in this episode we cover so many issues, from tips and tricks for planning your accessible trip, ableist experiences, and accessible travel green flags. As always, this episode has been transcribed and is available to read as a blog post over on casualableism.com/podcast. The direct link is in the episode description. Right, let's get into the episode. Good, well thank you so much for joining today. It's really great to chat to you, and I'm really looking forward to this episode, so thank you so much for reaching out and wanting to come on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really good to talk about this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic, and I think the fact that what you're doing with your blog and everything is just so great, and I think that it's something that, you know, it affects all of us want to travel, all of us want to be able to go places, and I think that it's just really good to highlight the positives as well as, you know, not just talk about the ableism of the industry, but also the positives of places that are doing it right, and of ways that people actually are wanting to make their venues accessible. So thank you. So I'll just do a bit of a podcasty introduction. So welcome, Helen Lear-Grant from Wheely Braw. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself a bit? Tell us who you are, what you do, and what inspired you to start your blog.
Well, as you said, I'm Helen Lear-Grant, and I have a travel blog called Wheely Braw. I also do some content creation on Instagram, and I live in Scotland. I'm originally from England, but I moved up here 10 years ago and absolutely fell in love with it. And shortly after moving up, I became disabled, and I love traveling. It's something that I've always done, and I missed it and really wanted to get back to it. So when my wife had a birthday coming up, we thought, let's go to the Outer Hebrides to celebrate. So, you know, let's pick one of the most remote places in Scotland and try there. And after weeks of phone calls and emails and, you know, scrolling through websites trying to find accessibility information and coming up with not a lot, I just threw my hands up in the air and said, let's just go and see what it's like, and why don't we film it for a laugh and see what happens. I'm thinking that we'd film it, we'd look at it ourselves, have a giggle, and never do anything with it. But I popped it up on YouTube, and shortly afterwards got some emails from people saying thank you so much. You know, I was planning on going to the Hebrides for my honeymoon, but didn't know if it was possible. Now I know it is. And when you hear things like that, you think, okay, it's not just me who needs this, it's other people.
Yeah.
So I started blogging and making YouTube videos, and then the Instagram stuff came along shortly afterwards.
That's really interesting. I think it is actually those experiences when you do share something that you think is only for yourself, and then you find that so many people relate to it, and then you're like, wow, actually this could be something. And similar with casual ableism, how it started for me, I started it because I wanted to like express these ableist experiences that I hadn't done anything about. And then actually I posted some things, and then everyone else was like, oh, this happened to me. And that's how it turned into what it is today, with other people sharing their stories, not me sharing my story. And it's the same. I think it's just those, and then you realize there's a bigger purpose to what you're doing, and especially for something that you love doing. And I think that, as you say, like the Outer Hebrides is such a kind of like iconic place as well. So that was also like such a great place to start off with, because so many people would probably think, oh yeah, I would love to go there, but don't know. I think that's also the issue, is that websites, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's booking.com, whether it's individual venues websites, they don't necessarily always have the accessibility statement, do they?
No.
So you either have to do it directly. So I think that's also like a really big issue, and it means that we'd have to put so much more into planning our trips than someone who isn't disabled, because we have to like phone them up personally, we have to send the emails, chase them, and you kind of meant you're having to plan for so long in advance.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that's what I wanted to do with this, really, was hopefully take some of that planning and research out of it for other people. So people can go, okay, here's a venue I can go to, and I can do this, this, and this. I know what to expect in terms of accessibility. And at the same time, feedback to the venue or to the accommodation or whatever, and say like, this is, this is the information I've provided, but it would be really useful if you provided that on your website as well, because I miss spontaneity. I used to. I travelled around in a van in Australia for a couple of years, and it was very much like, where should we go today? And this was all pre-disability, so it was so easy. You just go to places, and
Didn't
you
even
just
think
got.
about it. Didn't even have to consider, what if I get that and XYZ.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll be scrolling through Instagram and I'll see this like beautiful place and think, oh, I'd love to go stay in that accommodation. And then I have to go, oh, right, but is it accessible? Onto the website, no information, send an email. And I've realized over time as well, you have to get really specific in your emails. You can't just say like, oh, are you wheelchair accessible? Because, I've
Yeah,
been learning as I've been going along as well, about disability and accessibility, as somebody who has an acquired disability. I've been learning, and I still am. And yeah, I've realised that in those emails I have to say, I have to ask, what's your entrance like? I've had places say, oh yeah, we're wheelchair accessible, and then you get there and there's no wheelchair accessible toilets, and now I'm like, are you wheelchair accessible? How wide are your doors? Do you have an accessible toilet? And it's just like multiple questions. I've honed it down to like a copy and paste email that I
yeah. Yeah, I think that's also a good point, is that other people, but someone who isn't disabled, their perception of accessibility is just like a box tick, like
Yeah,
checkbox, we have a ramp, or but actually, and if people are writing accessibility statements about their own accommodation or venue, then haven't got a disability, then they don't necessarily actually know what's actually important. Like, it's the tiniest thing of, is the doorway wide enough? Is the toilet accessible? Is the basin too high, too low? I think that's also what's really good about what you're doing, is that you're actually someone who is disabled writing these things, so you actually have that first-hand experience, and you know what's important and what you need, and so therefore what someone else might need. So you're able to actually very honestly and genuinely write these things, not just, yeah, it's accessible, there's a ramp, there may be a step or two as well, but yeah, it's a ramp, it's fine. You can get in the
yeah,
building, but then in the building, you actually can't go any further. So that's also really important, is to have, I think, have people who actually are disabled, even in the bigger companies, like in hotel companies or other big travel companies, or accommodations, that can actually like have that first-hand experience, that kind of like just helps the way that it's written and the understanding. Because unless you actually live with a disability, whether it's through yourself or through a family member who's got a disability, you don't actually know exactly the infinite and the exact things, do you?
no, you don't. And even, I'm always careful to say as well, I'm writing about this from my experience as
Yeah,
a a manual wheelchair user. And yeah, I can stand and walk a little amount, but I tend not to when I'm out and about in new places, because I'm risking a fall if I do. And so I'm always careful to say that. And I always encourage other disabled people to do what I'm doing. Go out, write blogs, go stay places, because disability is so varied. And the more people writing about it from their experience, the better. One thing I think of is I presume of Simply Emma. So
yeah,
Emma, yeah, she's fantastic. And quite often we find that we end up going to the same places. It's just so strange, because we both live in Scotland. And but it's great because you have my version of how did I get on here in my manual wheelchair, and then Emma, like, how did she get on with her power chair, and how did it meet her needs or not? So
yeah.
the more of us doing this, the better. And yeah, I think it is important.
Definitely. I think also on that note of, like you say, you use your manual wheelchair, but Emma uses a electric wheelchair, power chair, and I use a mobility scooter. So those are three mobility aids which are very different, and their capabilities in themselves are very different. Like a manual wheelchair, you can just shove it up a ramp. You
Yeah,
can just get someone to just shove you up a ramp or drop you over a step. Whereas a power chair or a mobility scooter is less, like, it's more restrictions and level of incline. My mobility scooter, if something's too steep, it just doesn't stop, and I go just zooming down a hill, and that's terrifying, because there's
yes,
no like break to it. So I think all people think of someone who's disabled, they're in a wheelchair, so therefore it's one type of mobility aid, right? Tick box, it works for a certain wheelchair, fine. But as you say, like, your
yes.
different perspectives, it's for Emma when you go somewhere. the same place. It is very interesting, and I think that's also why it is so important that, as you say, like some people do write a blog, or even if you leave a review, for example, on Airbnb or somewhere, just leave a review. Even you don't necessarily have to undergo the whole like writing a blog and everything, but just write a review and just say, this is how it was for me, this is my mobility, and it will help people. It saves the next person kind of from having to go through the stress of either arriving and finding, oh wait, I can't actually get in, or just kind of saves you having to phone up, email and stuff like that. So I think it's really good point. And it's fun as well, because you're traveling and then you're using those experiences to then kind of help the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why sites like Ewan's Guide are really good. It's a really good place to leave reviews. And even I find TripAdvisor, there's a little search box, and I'd go in and type in wheelchair or accessibility or whatever, and see what comes up. And so that, I think it can be quite helpful to leave reviews on various sites. If you've got the energy and if you've got the time to do that, then yeah, it's definitely very, very helpful. I've found other people's reviews to be more valuable than websites from businesses and things like that. So although that's a
response to you,
yes,
much more.
yeah.
I think even I've had places where I've been kind of doing some conferences, and I was kind of asking the organisers, I know it's not a combination, but it's still similar, of is there a lift, is there a ramp, and they actually sent me photos. This is the lift, this is the lift size, this is a photo of the ramp, and even like that is just like so reassuring, because they could say we've got a lift or a ramp, but you're just like, how steep is it, how big is the lift, and kind of what sort of lift is it? Is it one to push the hold the button down all the way up, and that sort of thing. And so even just like that, people who then take the time to send photos of their venue, of their accommodation, be like, yeah, there is a tiny step, this is a photo of it, this is how like tall it is, would that be okay? But like, this is just being transparent and upfront, so when you arrive, you're not like, okay, hang on a minute, I was not expecting that. Because that's also a lot of it, you're kind of like met with confrontation, aren't you? When you arrive, arrive on holiday, you're going traveling, it's a really nice, a birthday celebration, or just like a well-earned holiday, and you arrive in a holiday mood, and then, oh, now what do I do? I think that's sort of taking away that like confrontation, and also feeling like you then have to battle with the host or the owner of like, you didn't tell me this, or what am I supposed to do? I've driven however many miles to get here. So I think that's also like a really good point.
Yeah, I think having that confrontation is, it immediately stops me in my tracks. As you say, you're in the holiday mood, and then you're like, oh God, what do you do now? And I think there's a lot of pressure as well to be like the good disabled person and not be too confrontational, not be too awkward, say like, right, how am I going to compose myself here? How am I going to, how am I going to do this? And, I've had issues when I've arrived, nothing like really significant, but I've had issues when I've arrived, and the responses have been different. Some of the responses have been, I'm really sorry, let's see what we can do to sort this. And, I think that's great. But there's been some where it's kind of like, well, I don't know what to do. What, like, and then you're like, oh, right, okay, so you're leaving the ball in my court now.
I'm in the only work here, it's not, up to me. No, definitely. I think that you never want to have to feel like you're pushing, or like you're trying to kind of get what you rightly should be able to deserve. And exactly, you just don't want to have to, like kind of be, oh, this wasn't a pain or whatever. Definitely, I think that the attitude that you're met with, if you're met with somebody who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, what can we do? Then that's fine. But when you're met with those people who either don't have the training or awareness, that's another thing. Like people, but that's in hotels or like bigger venues where it's not just the owner, then they don't have the training or the awareness of what someone with a disability might need, or how to even deal with the situation. And that's also really important. Bigger companies or bigger holiday resorts or bigger complexes probably should maybe have, I guess if you have to be able to stay more often, then you'll be more aware of it and more exposed to it. But that's another thing, is like if you have that attitude and that training and awareness of like, okay, well, let's find a solution to this. Just give me a minute. Here's a free drink while you wait, and we're going to sort this out.
Yeah. It's, I think as well, often you get the, oh, well, we don't get many disabled people here. And I'm like, well, I wonder why.
I just never had one before doesn't mean you shouldn't have the wherewithal and the accommodations to be able to then accommodate somebody with disability. Just because people don't normally come there that are disabled doesn't mean you aren't going to get somebody that's disabled. And you shouldn't kind of like think, well, in 10 years, we've never had someone in a wheelchair, so therefore we don't even need to worry about it. Because it shouldn't be about that. It should be about if someone does arrive in a wheelchair or with a mobility aid or with a visual impairment or any form of disability, then we can cater to it. It might take us a while to adjust, but yeah, we can do it. And it's that sort of open-minded attitude. And there are always going to be places that don't necessarily have that mentality, but hopefully the majority would. So in your experience, have you kind of, and not to like name names, but have you experienced ableist or inaccessible accommodation when you've been traveling?
Yeah, sadly, I find that individual, small scale businesses are the best, because you're very human. You're dealing face on face with another human being who has usually invited you along to kind of say, what can we do? And I'm looking for your input, and that that can be a really good conversation to have. But I've had incidents with hotels. This is awful, but I pretty much think every wheelchair user will know what I mean when I've had the goods lift experience or the bin lift experience, where when you arrive at a hotel, you want that experience of going into the reception. The receptions are always all beautiful, and you're hi, welcome, and that's part of the experience, rather than oh, sorry, we'll have to take you round the back where the bins are, up the bin lift or up the goods lift. That is immediately saying that you're not deserving of that experience.
You're secondary to the normal guests.
Yes, exactly. And if you asked any other guest to do that, can you imagine the uproar and the reviews? And everyone would think that they were justified in leaving a terrible review because they were made to go up the goods lift. As a disabled person, if you leave a review saying it was awful, I had to go up in the goods lift or in the bins lift, everyone's like, well, they did what they could,
Yeah.
There was one hotel where it was very awkward to get to the reception. I had to go through a car park and a weird lift again. But I got there and got to the reception in the end. And the booking, so I was with my wife, and my wife had the two dogs and the cases, and I was there in my wheelchair. The booking was in my name. I went up to the reception, to the lowered bit of desk. Usually you have to sign stuff, so it's handy to have this lowered bit of desk. So I went up to the lowered bit of desk, and the receptionist just ignored me and said to my wife, "Oh, hi, welcome. What name is the booking under?" So I kind of leaned round. I thought, yeah, hi. I thought maybe she hadn't seen me because there was a computer. So although they had a lower desk, it was all like piled up with stuff, and there was like computers blocking the view. So I kind of wheeled to the standard height desk, and I said, "Oh, hi, yeah, my name is blah, blah, blah." And I've booked in, and she just ignored me and said to Kirsty, right, okay, I just need you to fill out this form, blah, 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 blah. And Kirsty's there with the dogs and the cases. She doesn't have a free hand, and I'm there, hi. And so Kirsty just passed me the form, and I took it to the bit of desk, and I was filling it out. And then she said, oh, right, we also, to validate your parking, so again, talking to Kirsty, to validate your parking, we need your reg plate. And she went, it's not my car, I don't know. Passed it to me. And this whole time, it was, in the end, Kirsty had to walk away. And that was the only way
to talk to you.
Yeah. That was the only way to get the receptionist to talk to me was for Kirsty to walk away. And in the end, we got it all sorted. But that made me, I'm quite a resilient person, right? But that really just made me feel invisible. And I thought, wow, like, out of Kirsty and I, now married, I am the organizer. I am the planner. That's what I do, Yeah. So when I go and I've done all this organizing and this planning, and then I turn up and I'm ignored, it's like, it really knocks me a bit.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think also the fact that very often it happens where someone turns to have your with, not you, and then they get the message and then they talk to you. But the fact that she actually continued to ignore you, even though you'd made it obvious that actually you were the one in charge in that situation. Yeah, it does. And even if you're kind of like prepared for it, or you're used to it happening, it still does hurt. And it still is a bit like Okay, great. Especially when
Yes,
you're
yeah.
arriving on holiday, you don't feel like an equal. It's not, yeah, it's not the best, but oh.
Yeah. I just, what I think is like, how hard is it to see a human being and just like interact with them as a human being?
Yeah,
You
and I mean,
know?
the booking must have had two people on it. So was she
Yeah,
kind of thinking, well, where's the other person then? You know,
yeah.
it was for two people.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. And there's also another thing I've experienced is that, you know, you go to reception, you say, hi, I'm here, and they go, oh, hang on a minute. And then they turn around and go, we've got a wheelchair.
A
Like,
wheelchair
that's,
arrived.
yeah. It's like, what, did it just wheel itself in off the street?
Yeah.
You know?
Like,
I've
what
had,
do I do with this wheelchair? It's got to go an owner, you know.
yeah, it's like, I'm literally sat in it. Hi.
Just,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that happens in restaurants quite a bit as well. Like, oh, we've got a wheelchair, you know, can we? And I was like, oh, geez, you know, excuse
That
me,
ableist
do you mind?
language.
Yeah. Do you mind letting the wheelchair through? I'm like, yeah, can I come through as well, please? You know,
Yeah, on its own, or
yeah. Do you want me to sit on the floor while the
yeah,
wheelchair goes for a meal? Yeah. So there's
yeah,
you know, so there's incidents like that, and then on the flip side, now when I say things like this, I don't want to feel like I'm setting an impossible standard for people who work in the hospitality industry. But there's a flip side where people go over the top, you know, and I think, you know, I'm inclined to think, well, it's great that they're making an effort. You know,
yeah.
that's grand. But when you have people who are like, oh, you see them interact with everybody else, and it's like, oh hi, yeah, you know, what table you booked at or what room you booked in, blah, blah. And then when you arrive, it's oh hi, welcome. I love how you're dressed, and oh blah 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 blah. And you're like, wow, this is
Bit
yeah,
overboard. Yeah,
you're trying really hard. But I would never leave a negative review for that. I don't think some people might, and I think they would be justified because it is that, you know, drawing attention to you in a, you know, in a way that you might not. You just want to arrive and be treated exactly the same as
it
everybody
the same
else.
as everybody else. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, I tend not to complain about that because I feel like, yeah, you don't want to set this impossible standard of like, oh well, that's not being helpful enough and that's being too helpful, you know. It's kind of, yeah, you don't want to make it feel like it's too hard for people to find that balance. But I think really it's just like see a human, treat them as a human. That's really as simple as it is. But as you say, that comes down to training. Um, particularly with these, you know, bigger organizations, that should be standard, you know?
yeah. You would have thought that it would be, and you can understand how either a smaller, whether it's just by one owner, or as a family, but especially when you have employees, like as part of their customer service training. But even like before they get to the workplace, even if when they are training for hospitality, if they go to hotel school or if they, do whatever sort of college course in hospitality, maybe it should be even at the beginning stage training. This is how, when you have a disabled guest or someone with a difference, this is how it is, and this is what they may need, and this is how you deal with those situations. And if they arrive and they haven't got accessibility requirements in place for them, then this is how you deal with it. You don't just kind of close down and you don't go
Yes.
overboard. It's how you find the solution. So it's
Yeah,
even just at that very, very beginning stage, try to implement that awareness and exposure.
definitely. I think even when I think about myself at school, and at college and at university, accessibility was never mentioned in any way at all. I just had no concept of it. You know, I was in that privileged position to not have experienced it myself, and to be able to move around the world freely without thinking about accessibility. And it was only in maybe my third job, and I was working at a tourist attraction actually, and they were fantastic. Their training was top notch, and that's when I started to see the world differently, and see that it wasn't equal, and that, you know, people were having different experiences when they arrived at this tourist attraction, and how could we level that playing field, you know. So that was, I think, even, you know, when you just, yeah, it just needs to be fed in, you know.
And I think it goes beyond, just staff. I think anyone who whether it be friends or family or associates who don't necessarily realize what it is that you need. Even if you just say you're going out for a drink or going to the pub or going to a restaurant, they don't necessarily even kind of think about, hang on a minute, is it accessible? And unless they've maybe been, if they are a very close friend and they always go out with you, then they would become to know, like, my friends are incredible. They will be like, it's just a place. Don't worry, I know it's got a accessible toilet. I know it's got a ramp in. Don't worry, everything's fine. And it takes it away from me. If I say to them, hang on a minute, I need to phone out first and check if it's accessible, they're like, yeah, of course, whatever. I think that just like takes the stress out of it. It makes you feel less like you're kind of like being an inconvenience, or like you're kind of complicating the outing, or like making it a bit serious. And that's really kind of, so it's not just about, I think it's just like on a human level that to have that exposure to it. And I think that's kind of, you can't necessarily expect someone working in a hotel or an accommodation site or a tourist attraction to have that if they don't have that in their real life. And that's the whole thing about, shifting society's, mentality on disability, and just kind of like making it more of a open topic so that everyone is aware of it. And like you say, I went for so many years without even kind of realizing, because it was never talked about. And if it's never talked about, it's never going to be an issue. It's not a bad thing to talk about. It's not a, a negative. It's not anything taboo. It just needs to be open, and then there won't be these issues, and it won't feel like you're having to battle every time that you need to ask, is there a lift? Is there a step or anything like that? So it just goes even beyond that, that niche.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree. And I think it's really interesting, as you say, about when you're going out with friends and I'd say I'm the researcher, I'm the planner, I'm the organizer. So when someone says, like, oh, right, we're going on a night out and we're going here, I just like seize up and think, oh dear, right, now I'm gonna have to be awkward. And it's not awkward. It is not awkward in the slightest, but you feel, oh, now I'm gonna have to be awkward. Whereas recently, actually a couple of new friends who I met on Instagram, which is pretty cool. And they're both able-bodied, and I've had them message and say like, oh, let's meet for coffee. And I'm like, yeah, great idea. And they'll say, right, okay, give me a couple of days. I'll find us somewhere accessible to go. And I was stunned. I was like, wow, okay, yeah, cool. And then they came back to me and said, look, here's a couple of options. This is what the accessibility says on their website here, the access guide, whatever. And this is what this one says. Just do either of those suit you? And it's like being involved in that decision making as well can be really reassuring, because they're admitting, I don't fully know your access needs, and I don't, and I think because they've followed my my Instagram, they know that the things I speak about, how often somewhere will say they're accessible, and
yeah, so
accessible is such a yeah. And
they
that's
were kind of helping you out in terms of they were kind of like taking that like responsibility away from you, but they weren't making that decision on your behalf. They still, I think often people are like, oh yeah, no, it's fine, I've checked, don't worry, I've checked, but we still need to know for ourselves, like doubly sure that it's going to be fine. So it was really nice that they actually then still kind of like gave you the kind of the options, and so you could double check that for your specific needs it was going to be fine. And that's like what it's all about. It makes it so much easier, and especially with like new friends, it's always a bit daunting to be like, hang on a minute, yeah, but can we actually just like double check that that is, or arrive somewhere? Or if you don't say it in advance and you arrive somewhere and you see the step, and you're gonna think, do I just not say anything? Do I hope I don't need the toilet? Or do I say actually can we go somewhere else?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's as well, if we're talking about education around disability, I mean that's one. I think Instagram has its faults, of course, but places like Instagram and TikTok, there's a huge amount of disabled creators on there sharing information and trying to commit connections and friendships, and I think it's a really good like environment to learn more about disability, whether you are disabled or not. I've learned a lot about other people's disabilities and access needs from following them, and I know that able-bodied people have learned from my stuff, and I think that just connecting and in that way is going to increase, because when those people then go on to do particular jobs, accessibility is in their mind.
Yeah, that's very, very, very true. And I think that is a really good thing about social media, is that you can reach far more people with the content as well. And I think that even like, so if you've learned more about other disabilities through following people, and think through partial ableism, I have learned and been more aware of different types of ableism to different types of disabilities. you know, I went into this from my lived experience. It's always really important to talk about lived experience. So that's what I know and what I have experience with. A physical disability, and then hearing submissions from people who have, you know, colitis, or they have a colostomy bag, or they have, you know, their you know, ADHD or any form of or visual impairment that I had no lived experience of. I didn't have any kind of awareness of these ableism that they face in their own unique experience. And that's so important that even as a disabled person, I wasn't aware of that, even though I'm very aware of lots of things to accessibility and discrimination, because, you know, I think if you only have that one viewpoint of lived experience, you don't know. And that's so important that even now, like, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I know that it would be an issue for someone else. So if you're cross with somebody else, then you also like have that awareness, and it's so important. Definitely. I think there's also like, you know, it means that anybody, I think my friend shared casual ableism when it first started, and someone from her work followed it, and they were a teacher, and they had some students in their class who had additional needs or disabilities, and they were then able to be like, wow, I didn't know that possibly my students could face these things. And even that, having people who want to learn more, and it's like they actually want to like expose themselves to more information, but possibly wouldn't know how to, or wouldn't know how to go about it. So that's why like your account, casual ableism, with different accounts and creators on Instagram and other platforms, is so important, because that's a way of people can engage really easily with just like small content, just by reading a post, reading a caption. And it's just like, I think the value is very underrated. Don't realize how much value it actually has.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I think particularly with casual ableism, for example, it's sharing so many different points of view and experiences all in one place. I think that's, you know, that's a really kind of, it brings people together who experience similar, you know, a similar thing, but in different ways. And yeah, and it's a good learning point for a lot of people, I think.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So in terms of like tips for accessible travel, what would be your kind of like top 5 tips for anyone who's maybe just hasn't gone traveling much, or hasn't necessarily like ventured to a different country or within their own country? What would be like your top 5 tips to look for in terms of accessible travel and how to go about it?
Well, I'm definitely not the person to ask about overseas travel, because I've not been overseas for years. But there are, you know, plenty of people on Instagram sharing their experiences. So that would probably be tip number 1, is get on social media and start following people. And I think as well, just realize that yes, some people do have, particularly if you look at the rights on flights, stuff that's around at the minute, you know, you can see that some people are having some really horrible experiences on flights. But if you look amongst that, there are tips and tricks there on, you know, what to prepare for before you arrive at the airport, how to protect your mobility equipment, what your rights are, and things like that. So I would say that looking at movements like that is great for overseas travel. I would say tip number 2, research. It's my favorite thing. And yes, it's annoying that we have to do it, but as it stands, yes, we do. So research. So when you arrive, you know what to expect. I think if you are looking at a destination as a whole, you can find out what pavements are like and things like that. I often use local Facebook groups for areas as well, because it's a great resource to say, you know, does anybody know of any wheelchair accessible cafes or any problems with wheelchair accessibility in the town or whatever? And disabled people who live there will come back and say, right, okay, if you're going this way, use this pavement, or, you know, here's a great place for you to stop for lunch. So definitely utilizing kind of lived experience from other people. And I do find those local groups for particular areas are really good.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. I think what am I on tip number 3? Access guides. So if you're familiar yourself with that, accessibility statements and access guides, and quite often on websites you'll find those right in the small blurb at the bottom, or in the frequently asked questions. Yeah. But you'll go through the frequently asked questions and you'll find out, did it provide like washing up liquid? How many dogs can you take? Did it provide treats for your dog? Did it do this? Blah, 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 blah. And eventually you get to the accessibility information at the bottom there. But yeah, access guides are really, really helpful. In that they don't use blanket statements like wheelchair accessible or wheelchair friendly or things like that. They use photographs, measurements, detailed descriptions about what to expect when you get there, and it helps you make your own decision on whether that's accessible for you or not. I would say number 4, let businesses know your access needs before you arrive. I think that can be reassuring, even if you've read all of as much information as you can. It can be helpful to say, hi, I'm going to be arriving on this day, and I just want to check that. As I said, I've got that copy and paste email, which is, do you have level or ramped access? Do you have an accessible toilet? Do you have, depending, is it a cafe? Like, what height are your tables? Because there's nothing worse than not being able to get your knees under the table and being, and struggling with that. So so maybe get yourself a copy and paste email to save time if you're traveling around a lot, particularly, or if you're emailing a lot of different businesses. And then if you number it as questions, then quite often I find people will go and individually answer each question. So that can be a good way to get concise information that you need. And then obviously give them a nudge and tell them to pop all that information in their access guide. And a big one for me is mapping out toilets. That's my tip number 5. Is when you're going somewhere, is for me, I have to know where all the toilets are, and factor in, okay, I'll have been out for like X amount of time by this point, so I can stop at this toilet. And so good websites for that I find are local council websites. Will have information about the location of toilets, and the changing places toilet website have a map if you use changing places toilets. Just I do find council websites, and I'm sure there's another website, Toilet Finder or something like that. If you Google the wheelchair accessible toilets in whatever area, and often the descriptions aren't detailed. They don't tell you exactly what you're going to find in there. But I know for myself, I can kind of be a bit flexible with what I need. So yeah, I think that's always good, because then that's one stress taken out of your day, where you can go to the loo, which is
that for me, that's a big thing. I think actually my mum used to, when I was younger, my mum used to have an app on her phone. It was like Toilet Finder, or like app on her phone. If we were out somewhere, it would be like, okay, let's find out what the nearest one is, especially if you're going to London for appointments and stuff. It was just like, okay, we need to know, because and it's a fact. You can't just like run, I need the loo, I'm just going to run quickly until I find somewhere. It's not like that for us. It has to be, sort of requirements. So that's a really good point, and I think that's a really good tip to know that local council websites have that information as well. I think it's all, you think of accessibility, you think, okay, I'm going to go somewhere, the accommodation itself accessible, perfect, but it's not just about that environment. You actually want to know about the local area. If you go to nearby towns, if you go to nearby restaurants or cafes, so that's being on holiday and traveling, that's what it's all about. It's not just about being in the room or being in the venue. So that's a really good point, and that's really, really helpful. I would never have thought to look at council websites for where the toilets are. That's a really, really good point.
Most of them have it, most of them will just say where they are, and usually opening times, and whether or not you need a radar key. So a radar key is really handy.
Yeah, that's another like big tip, is to get a radar key, because then wherever you are, I think even like in McDonald's, the disabled toilets have a radar key, and I think if you need to go to the toilet, you have to ask for it. So that's really annoying if you're like desperate, or or they're busy, that you actually have to, you can't just like open the door and walk in, which is good in terms of keeping it clean and people not like abusing it. But it is really good to know. I think I was caught out a few times in McDonald's thinking I'd just be able to open the door and go in, but I couldn't, and getting someone's attention is like, hey, I need the key, please hurry up. Not just wait a minute. No, I can't wait a minute, actually, wait, I'll get you the key in a minute. Oh, please give it to me right now. So that's also a good point, is radar keys. And then you are covered on all bases, which is really, really good. Definitely. And I think, like, what for you, when you go somewhere, what is it the places do right? What are the kind of like key things that you feel are kind of like the green flags of somewhere that when they do something right, what is that kind of like the green flag experience, would you say?
The green flag experience. Um,
Not promoting the breakdown coverage company.
yeah. Yeah, so it varies. I think when a green flag for me definitely is seeing an accessibility statement or an access guide. That for me is a big green flag. That's saying we've thought about it. Or if they mention that their staff have like disability confidence training or some equivalent. I think that's saying like we've thought about this and actually invested time, energy, and money perhaps into making our business more accessible. But I think for me as a travel blogger, when I get invited somewhere, I think it's quite a brave thing for businesses to do, because they're asking somebody really like, tell me what's wrong. Like, I've had different experiences. I've had people who are clearly very, very confident in what they offer, and I've had other people saying, look, we get minimal feedback from our guests. Come here, rip us apart, tell me everything we need to know about your experience and how it can be improved. And that for me is it's quite a vulnerable thing and a humble thing for those businesses to do. And that for me is a green flag, when they're willing to engage people with lived experience, and not just take. I always think it's such a shame when businesses will take like minimum measurements for how big their bathroom should be and how big the doorway should be, because they think that they're doing the right thing. It's what they're told by designers and architects and things, but actually asking someone with lived experience, well, is that doorway actually wide enough? Do you have enough room in that bathroom for you and your carer or your assistant? So actually engaging people with lived experience, that's always a big green flag for me. And yeah, I think yeah, green flags when you arrive somewhere are just going in and just it's seamless, and you just feel like you feel like you've arrived, and there's no barriers. But here's another thing as well. I've had this happen once, and I wish it happened more often. I've called a business and asked about their accessibility, and they said, "Look, we're in a listed building. It's something that we're looking at, but we're not accessible. However, there is a similar restaurant on blah 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 street, and they are accessible." And
That's pretty good.
yeah, and that for me is if you know that your business doesn't meet that person's needs, have some knowledge about other businesses in the area, because ultimately you're losing the business anyway. It's not like it's not, that person's not going to come because you've just told them it's not accessible. So you might as well go that next step and just say, oh, actually, yeah, our hotel isn't accessible, but here's a hotel that is, that's similar or whatever. And when that happened, I thought, oh wow, that was really, I came away from that experience as well feeling positive, rather than feeling like, oh God, another place I can't go to. I came away.
It was a positive reaction. They weren't just saying no. They were saying, no, we're not, but however, try this one. And that, I think, it wasn't just like a flat. It's a much better way to kind of like conduct the conversation, because then you're leaving with another option rather than, okay, now where do I go now? So that was really good, really good.
Yeah, and I now have a positive view of that business. I've not come away with a negative view, which you can when you're like, oh, I've come away with a positive view, and would recommend them to people who don't have access.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really important. I think that talking about, saying how they recommended something that actually was better. That happened to me at the restaurant looking for in Brooklyn in London, looking for going for a curry, and checking where the toilets were. And most of them were downstairs. And going into each one saying, where are they? Downstairs. Okay, no, thank you. And then the last one we went into, they were like, no, but the one across the road down there, they have okay loo, so that's fine. And it was just exactly that thing of like, okay, you don't have to, like gatekeep your business, because as you say, like you're not going to go anyway because it's not accessible. So to then actually say, no, but that one over there, that's really good. And then you kind of think, oh yeah, great experience. And you don't go away feeling negative. You don't kind of get as exhausted, I guess, in the kind of like the search, whether it be a cafe, restaurant, or accommodation. That is really good.
Yeah,
And even just acknowledging that they have that awareness that it would be an issue, and therefore they maybe have it happen quite a lot, maybe. So they're used to saying people, no, we're not, but try that place. So I think that's a really
yeah,
good, just that mentality of being open and just suggesting as well is really good.
yeah. No, I agree. It is about kind of coming away from experiences, feeling that it's been easy, as you say, that it's not exhausted you, that you're not coming away feeling negative. It's yeah, whether a place is accessible or not, you want it to feel seamless, really. That's what you want.
Yeah. Definitely. I think as you were saying about, measurements for, your mobility aid, it's the same, goes back to the fact that no mobility aid is going to be the same as well. In a manual wheelchair, some are wider than others, or, a child might be in a manual wheelchair and that's a lot smaller. Or, you need to have one with like bigger wheels if one, it's you have fixed ones where once the wheels come off, they're built differently. There isn't just one type of manual wheelchair.
Yeah,
And I've had ones that aren't specifically made for me and they're huge, but then other ones are kind of more tailored and they're much narrower. And that is like such a good point that people don't necessarily realize unless they actually have lived with a mobility aid or live with somebody who has a mobility aid. I
yeah,
think even just beyond that, even just like in not specific rooms, but even just like the general floor space of a room or a cottage or a bungalow, whatever it is, a lodge, that even just like where do you actually park your mobility aid if you don't use it all the time. So like for me, I would, go in on it and then I'd get off it and sit on a sofa and move around a bit. So then where do I
yeah,
park it without being in the way? And where do I charge it? Because I have to charge it, it's got a
yeah,
battery. And even that's even beyond that, thinking of where plugs are, where sockets are for plugging things in. Are they low? Are they behind furniture? Because if you're charging a mobility aid, or for example, I sleep with a ventilator at night. So by the bed, there needs to be a table by the bed or a bedside
yeah,
table or something. And there needs to be a plug pretty near to be able to plug it in. And normally, like in hotels, very often they're not by the bed, and therefore, if you're going to ask for an extension lead, and they always do give you one, but it's that sort of thing. You're like, hang on a minute, like those are other things you have to think about that you wouldn't necessarily normally think about. And someone who didn't have to charge a mobility, didn't have to sit with a ventilator, wouldn't necessarily think about. You go, hang on a minute, there's like no space even to put a chair by the bed, so I have
yeah,
to like share the bed with this huge machine, and I'm like cramped up beside it. Like it's not ideal. Those are the kind of added things, and like that's where photos of things and even just a statement saying that we have plugs accessible, not behind furniture, even that sort of thing is just like so. And even in terms of like leaving reviews saying the plugs were at a decent height, didn't have to bend down, they weren't too low, and that's where the review stage can come in. And if people take photos and leave reviews with photos, all of that helps for the next person.
it definitely does. It definitely does. One thing I find thinking about like hotel rooms is, turning space, for example, in a manual
Yeah,
wheelchair, you can just turn on the spot. And I often think to myself, I know there are some power chairs that can turn on the spot, but not many. Usually there's quite a big turning
yeah,
circle
yeah,
involved. And I think, wow, how are people expected to maneuver between the furniture here? Or a big thing for me is getting to the curtains and being able
yeah,
to open and close the curtains and the window. And quite often I can't. And it's, I remember once being in a hotel room, my wife had gone down to the bath or something, and I was there like, thinking, I can't do that. I was, that's just really odd. I can't even open the curtains here. But yeah, so there's lots of little things, and I think what everybody needs is different, as you say, and I think if we all leave reviews about what's important to us, then it builds a bigger picture of what things are like.
definitely. And if you have that energy and that capacity to do so, it does really help. But it doesn't have to be, reviews are often thought about in a negative way. They don't have to be the negative reviews of you could do this better. It's just in a positive way, this was great. And for anyone else looking in this situation, even just beyond disability, just like it's great for dogs, or we travel with dogs. So therefore, yep, there's a park nearby to walk the dogs on, or that sort of thing. It is
Yeah,
really, really good. And I think that yeah, it's all about unique experience, and the more people who do have that different experience to be able to leave those comments is really, really good. And
yeah.
yeah, and so in terms of you said earlier that you reckon that the kind of like individually owned places are better than the larger companies. I guess that the personal experience is better. You should expand on that a bit more.
Yeah, I think often the big businesses are quite faceless. you know, and the person you're speaking to is not the person who makes the decisions about the building and about how accessible it is and about procedures and policies. You know, the person you're speaking to is somebody who works in the reception or manages the housekeeping team or, you know, whatever. Whereas when you're dealing with small businesses, family-run businesses, you are speaking to the person who makes the decisions. And I think as well, a lot of people who go into the business of providing accessible accommodation often have, like on a small scale, often have experience of it themselves. It might be, you know, somebody in their family or a friend or something like that. And that's where their drive to provide this accommodation comes from in the first place. So there is already a level of knowledge about it. So I think that's often why. Whereas I think sometimes the bigger, more faceless corporations, their drive to do it is because it's a legal requirement in hotels. Do you know? And you can feel sometimes like it's been an afterthought, or it's like, oh God, we've got to tick that box. So here we have an accessible room, but all it is really it's a room on the ground floor with some, you know, a shower chair and some rails in the bathroom, and that's about as far as it goes. And yeah, that's great for some people. That's all some people need, you know.
Yeah.
But for others, they need a lot more. And if you're just doing it to tick boxes, your heart's not in the right place. Whereas I think a lot of people who have like smaller businesses and family-run businesses, their heart is in the right place, and they want to do it. And as well, they're meeting the people who come and stay at their accommodation, and it, you know,
Yeah.
it's much more personal. I've had some great experiences. One place I went along to, and I said, look, you know, your door thresholds are too high. I was struggling, and I explained about how with power chairs as well, it would be really difficult. So they said, right, great, no worries. I've recommended the provider and things, and they went away and they got ramps for it, and sent me photos, little updates like, look, they're here, and you know, what do you think of this? And this is okay, and that was great. Another place to stay is it's not an accessible place, but it was a point where I could kind of manage more. They invited me back to do a more comprehensive accessibility report, like a lived experience accessibility report with some recommendations, and they are currently in the process of turning their non-accessible accommodation into an accessible accommodation. So yeah. So I think that's when people are willing to engage people with lived experience, pay people with lived experience, I think that shows that they're really, really keen on making improvements and that their heart is in the right place.
Definitely, let's take it with you know, making the assumption that okay, that's accessible, you know, box tick on, you know, really accessible kind of guidelines of right, you know, X, Y, Z, right, okay, perfect. So that assumption that what they do will work for everybody, and that's why, you know, bringing in different people and embracing their opinion, especially if you actually stayed there before and say, actually, we could really utilize your lived experience, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the only way it's going to be done properly and going to be done right. And as you're saying about hotels with accessible room, you know, it's got the wet room, it's got XYZ. I don't know if you ever noticed, but I've always noticed that accessible rooms in hotels, it's always a double bed. I don't think I've ever had an accessible room that's had twin beds, and I travel with my mum. And like we're fine to share a bed, but if you had a carer or a PA or even a friend, it means you're forced to share a bed or buy another room, which then brings the cost up. And I think that's really strange that they're always double beds.
This
I
is
just think
really
that's
strange
just like
because I've had the opposite experience.
oh really?
Yeah. So I often go in, like, because I'm traveling with my wife, you know, all
Yeah.
romantic weekend away, and you turn up and it's like twin beds. You're like, oh, okay. But I do find now a lot of hotels have the zip link beds,
Yeah.
where they can be zipped apart, you know, and I think it's important for them to mention that and say, you know, look, do you want these made up as two singles or do you want them made up as a
Yeah.
double? And I also think providing connecting rooms is really helpful if somebody has an assistant with them. And I think those rooms, this is my opinion anyway, those rooms should be given a heavily reduced rate. But that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. You don't necessarily always want to be forced to share a room with somebody because of financial, you know, the disability tax is a huge issue in paying more for, anything. So therefore having to like pay for another room at full price is a lot. And so like, how concert tickets, if you're going with a carer or a PA or another person, you get a reduced rate ticket or even a free ticket very
Yeah,
often with the big venues. So that should be the same sort of thing with hotels, or there should be like a discount or some way of reducing, bringing that cost down, because you don't always
yeah,
want to have to share with
no,
somebody who isn't necessarily family or a partner or a spouse. So that's a really good point as well, that it should be like that leeway for it. But they're definitely interconnecting rooms is really good. I think often we've had that with some of my grandparents, so our rooms are connected. So obviously they're quite elderly. So then, they don't need anything. But if there was a problem, we could, go in. And
yes,
that sort of thing is really, really good, and having those abilities to have that. But obviously that often relies on the bigger hotels or bigger kind of like venues to have that on offer. But I think these are all like
yeah,
things you could consider, having that versatility. As you say, like the zip and link beds, having that option. So you're not forced to either having only twin or only double. It's just, oh,
yeah,
what other
yeah,
options? And especially when it comes to accessibility, having variation so that you can adapt your accessibility measures and accommodations into what works for each, unique person coming to stay, rather than having
yeah,
to set this is the only kind of accommodation accessibility things that we have. But actually we
yeah.
have all these different things. How can we adapt these things to suit your needs?
Yes, yeah. I think places that have lots of different equipment to hire are amazing because, being able to say, do you, do you need a hoist? I mean, the amount of equipment that disabled people have to travel with a lot of the time is unreal. So being able to say like, oh right, okay, I don't need to like bring a hoist or arrange to pay for one to hire one while I'm there.
Yeah,
Yeah, having those there or different options of shower chairs and things like that. Just having things like that make a space adaptable, and just having that equipment available.
definitely. And it makes it accessible for everybody, not just someone
Yes,
with a certain disability, because that is just the whole thing. It's not a monolith. Everything is different. Like you and I, we both have physical disabilities, but they're different. And
yeah, yeah,
everyone, even the same condition that I have, the same strain and everything, we are so different. People that I
yeah,
know are the same. That's and that's just how it is. And also people have different, I guess people's priorities of their needs are different as well. So even if it's not on a kind of like base level of ramp and access, other needs are different because of it varies person to person. And I think that's also
yes,
a really kind of like key thing to understand. It's not just the one type, and that's something that society is gradually kind of, I think, being more aware of. That it's not just disability is that certain thing. It's kind of like
mhm.
every type of person.
Yes, definitely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we've heard about your blog. Can you tell us a bit more about Accessible Holiday Scotland? Because you're co-founder of that. Let's hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, so Accessible Holidays Scotland is probably the more formal wing of things. So I really enjoy doing the blog and the Instagram stuff and sharing information in that casual, informal way. But as somebody who likes to research stuff, I recognize the importance of having information all in one place in a format that's easy to access. So it's slowly building up. It's early days still. But the idea is that it's a database of accessible tourism experiences within Scotland. So that includes accommodation, days out, shopping, and things to do. And it's just having a database there that you can search and that you can tick what your accessibility needs are. Say you're searching an accommodation, you go, okay, right, well, I'm gonna need a hoist. I'm gonna need a shower chair. I'm gonna need whatever, and you can tick those and filter out all the stuff that isn't relevant. And I think like the aim with it is just to save people time and energy in searching for things and providing decent descriptions of what to expect there as well, photographs and links to access guides, and it's just having it all in one place. I'm really passionate about traveling around Scotland and the places that you can experience. And sadly, it's not always easy. And I think it's so some of the bigger tourism organisations, Visit Scotland and places like that, are becoming more aware, and they are sharing more information, but it can be very hit and miss. Yeah, I remember searching on one big website once for accessible accommodation. I was like, whoa, there's loads of wheelchair accessible accommodation. And it turned out it was accommodation that you could like literally wheel into, but the bedrooms were upstairs, or you could wheel in the front door and you could get to the kitchen but not to the bathroom, and so it's that. I think having something that's that has the input of a disabled person at the moment, and hopefully in the future more disabled people having input from people like that is really valuable. It makes it, for me, when I find things like that, it's comforting, it's reassuring. I think that it's information that's being provided by somebody who knows what my experience is and knows what I need to know. So yeah, just trying to provide that for Scotland, and it's myself and my wife who are running it together. Yeah. So
yeah, I think it shows that that whenever you find something like that that's already been already been done on your behalf and done for you, to show that someone cares enough that they've experienced something that you are going to experience or you have experienced, and then the fact that you actually care enough to then make those things available to share that knowledge that you've because even just by traveling around and seeing people, we acquire so much knowledge of where's good accessible, where isn't, and tips and tricks of how to make life easier. So the fact that you're then using and sharing that knowledge that you've acquired is just so amazing. And definitely, I think that Scotland's such an amazing, beautiful place. And I think you think about it and you think, well, maybe there isn't that much in terms of accessibility, but to know that there is, created somewhere designated to highlighting those amazing places that are accessible and that people can come and enjoy Scotland. I think it's incredible. So thank you so much for providing that, and the blog as well. I love the blog as well, and the fact that you offer so much information and the different types of the fact that this is what Scotland. It's not just about accommodation; it's about all sorts of things, and that's so if you actually arrive somewhere, you know that where else you can go and do in the area will actually be accessible as well. That's really, really great.
Yeah, I think I would love in the future to expand it and include itinerary planning for people, because I think that can be a big thing. Finding the right accommodation is one part of the battle. And as we mentioned earlier, it's then finding what's the accessibility like in the local towns? Where can I go eat? Where can I go to the toilet? Where can I, do all this kind of stuff? So I think I would love in the future to develop it to provide, itinerary planning that's individual for that person, to say, okay, well, these are your access needs. What can we find for you to do? These are your access needs and your interests. What can we find for you to do that in this area that's right? And if that area doesn't have enough opportunities, what other area could we find that's similar that you might enjoy as well? And just being able to hand someone over an itinerary and just say, right, just go enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and I think also the itinerary of what you can do, obviously, you don't go on holiday on your own, whether it's with a family, if you've got children, if you're going with, different age groups, to actually know that you could all go and enjoy something together rather than, okay, well, we want to do this, but you can't get in there, so you could stay behind. That's really also good to know that there are tons of other things you can go and do as a group that is going to be actually accessible for everybody in terms of interest and activity. It's really also a really good point, because it's not just about us in a way, especially on a holiday. You need to kind of also be able to not get left behind or not feel like you're only doing activities that suit you. I think that's also really good to kind of be able to have that everyone's going to be able to enjoy and access themselves as well. So it's really good. And definitely, I think that's a really good idea of knowing what else you can do in different places. And yeah, it's really, really amazing.
Yeah, it's are you looking for a romantic weekend away, or are you looking for an adventure, something adventurous, or are you looking for family experience, and just try and put that together? That's a big job. There's a lot of work to do.
I can.
And quite a busy person, but it's definitely that is on the list of things that I'd love to expand to.
Yeah, I think there's so many famous people, influencers, who are getting gifted holidays in amazing places. And I think that really should be expanded to disabled people, disabled influencers, to gift them the holidays. And rather than you having to use your own money and your own resources to trying out these places to be able to create your database of options, then have companies be like, right, okay, we're going to pay you to come and post about how amazing our venue is.
Yes.
It shouldn't be just and it's not, and it shouldn't be just about come and stay for free because we want to use your knowledge. And so obviously that's fine as well, but it also should be, yeah, we're gonna, Thomas Cook or whoever it is that offer these people these amazing holidays, yeah, just come and you could write about the fact that we are accessible, the fact that our pool has a hoisted do or anything like that. And I think that would also be really good. It's not just because I think so many more people will see it as well. I think the more that people are able to post about these things, the more these companies like proudly announce that they are accessible was really good as well. It shouldn't be up to us to use our money to explore these places in a way. It kind of should be up to the companies to also be like, hey, we're going to pay for you and your family or whoever to come on a trip, and yeah, tell us about accessibility needs, and then also at the same time maybe not publicly but behind the scenes tell us what could be improved. I think there should be like a
Yes.
huge sector, the influencer market, that could be used for companies to get disabled travelers and people to actually get like in the door and announce and be proud to know, because they're going to get more bookings if more people know they're accessible as well. So it's a win-win for them.
Exactly. I think sometimes with a lot of businesses, I think, they have such a strong style. They have such a, especially these really Instagrammable kind of places, there's such a strong sense of style. And I think for some reason they feel that disability doesn't fit in with that.
Mm.
And it's like, but have you been on Instagram and looked at some of the disabled influencers out there? I mean, like, there are some like stunningly beautiful, stylish people who are like creative and interesting and intelligent, and you know, and you could be engaging these people, and as you say, opening up to a whole different market. But yeah, so I think businesses need to start viewing disability differently. Not as something that, yeah, not as something that's like, oh, well, it's not really the look that we're going for. It's like, yeah, but it can be if if you make it happen. And as you say, I think that it shouldn't be up to disabled people to use our own money to go and review these places and put that information out there. I don't think any disabled person should be out of pocket for any work that they do. And I think, yeah, disabled people deserve to be properly reimbursed for their work as well, because going away and doing a review, a free stay is fantastic, and for a lot of people that would be enough. But at the end of the day, it doesn't pay the bills, and for some people, this is a career, and as we all know, there's disability is an expensive thing. So to be properly reimbursed for putting the work in and giving such valuable feedback and advertising, promotion, it's a whole package that should be looked at as a job, not as a favor.
Definitely, and I feel like if I saw a disabled influencer or someone of high profile on Instagram, a creator or whatever, with disability posting about somewhere amazing, being accessible, I'd be far more likely to book that holiday than if I saw, I don't know, an ex Love Island person or whatever posting about that place. I'd be like, okay, whatever. But actually
Yeah.
seeing someone who's had a first-hand experience of knowing that it really would be okay, I'd be far more likely to be like, wow, actually, yeah, and seeing how someone with disability kind of like portray represents the venue through photos and everything through their own eyes, because it's a different perspective as well. So
Yes.
definitely, I think really, really is a missed trick out there for anyone who's in big
No.
companies. But no, definitely, I
Yeah.
think that also the fact that disabled people, we want to go on holiday, we want to travel, and whether that's
Yeah.
just within our own country, if we can't, if flying is not an option, or if it is abroad to amazing places, we still want to travel. There's no reason that we don't have that same desire for a holiday, to visit places, to travel, to explore new experiences, new cultures, but just the same as everybody else in that aspect. And I guess the reason that a lot of people don't is because of access, and because
Yeah.
of the lack of
Massively.
information
Massively.
available and the lack of awareness. So yeah, we want to travel and we want to explore places just as much as everybody else.
Agreed. I always say that the biggest barrier to travel for me is lack of information. That is it. The
Yeah,
biggest barrier is just a lack of information there. But just quickly on on influencers sharing about their holidays. I think one thing that we can do as disabled people is really support other people who are sharing these kind of things. There's a great community of disabled travel bloggers. And if we're all making sure that we're going in, commenting, liking, saying, well done, this is amazing, because the more engagement that happens on these posts, the more likely these businesses are to continue engaging disabled people. We need to make sure that they realize that there's an audience out there, and
definitely
the market.
Yeah, and then actually we actually want that's the kind of content we want to see as well.
Yeah.
And we want to see those people traveling different places, and then definitely I think if we, as a very good point, to support those, seeing those posts and supporting them, because the more interaction they get, then the more these companies are going to go, actually, it is worthwhile. And clearly disabled people obviously are interested in that, because they probably don't think that we actually are, but we are. And even if we don't actually kind of travel ourselves, it's still lovely. We still enjoy seeing, the other people traveling and seeing, pictures of beautiful places on Instagram. It's still something that we enjoy consuming,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So this would be really great to finish up. What would you say is the kind of like the main thing overall that would still need to be improved in terms of accessible travel, whether that be accommodation, or in what sort of the main thing that still needs to be worked on and improved?
And I think it is that information. I think it is making sure that information is out there and is provided by the people providing the service, so by the accommodation providers, by the restaurants, and that should become normalized across the industry. Is that, as I said earlier, you can find out that they provide, tea bags and biscuits for your dog, but you can't find out if you can get in the building. So it's we really need to be putting more importance on accessibility. And I mean, it's great to find out that I've got biscuits for my dogs when I get there. But yeah, what kind of like hand towels they provide, and have they got a hairdryer, all that stuff, is great. We need that info. But I think we need to make sure that as part of that frequently asked questions stuff, that there is accessibility info. And a lot of places offer accessible rooms, but they don't mention that on a site, and I think, God, you're missing out on a market here. So it's beneficial for everyone. It's beneficial for the businesses and for the customers. So I think, definitely a stronger stress on providing accessibility information.
Yeah, that's very true. And also it would save them time on a day-to-day basis if they just had it all written down already, rather than having to answer emails or phone calls, each time saying, yes, we have this, no, we don't have that, and to have that like statement. And I think even it goes beyond the individual places themselves, even places like Airbnb and Booking.com, for example, that it should be a requirement that on every listing there should be a space for the accessibility statement, or for there to be some form of explanation or just to get information to make that standard, so people do have to fill it out, and then it is there. It should be a policy.
Yeah, I agree with that. With Airbnb in particular, it's I think it's frustrating scrolling through and trying to find, and you find the odd one that maybe, if you go on Airbnb and you filter by any accessibility criteria, in Scotland, I think like 2 places come up. It's like, there are more accessible places than that, or places that might be, they might not consider themselves accessible, but there might be a person who can manage 3 steps but can't manage a flight of stairs. So you need to be saying there's 3 steps into the building.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, this has been really, really great. Thank you so much for sparing your time to chat and just for reaching out in the first place to want to be on. I think it's been a really good conversation, really lots of tips and advice, and just really great general chat about the topic. And it is important, as we've discovered through our conversation, that people want to travel and that it should be accessible, that there are places out there that actually are doing it right and that are okay for people to be able to go on holiday to. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been lovely to talk to you and to meet you today. And thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been really good. And as I say, I'm really passionate about Scotland, and there is a lot out there in Scotland for disabled people.
Yeah, great. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to Casual Ableism Talks, Accessible Travel with Wheely Braw. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and are now off to plan your own accessible holiday. Helen's Instagram, Wheely Braw, and details for Accessible Holiday Scotland are linked in this episode description. We highly recommend that you follow her. If you'd like to submit your story to us, then you can submit it to us via the Google form, which is linked in this episode description. You can choose to be anonymous or tagged when we post your submission, so no pressure if you prefer some privacy. thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.